Now to my final topic. My next guest, Professor Muyiwa Oyinlola, recently delivered his inaugural lecture titled Going Together to Go Far, My Pathway to Impacting Sustainable Development in Africa at De Montfort University in Leicester. The lecture highlighted Professor Oyinlola's extensive experience in leading multidisciplinary and multi-sectoral international projects aimed at addressing critical areas of sustainable development across Africa. I was going to go straight into the topic, which is to, of course, discuss sustainable development. But having read your profile, and you've just given me this, I've had a quick flick through. You're a very interesting character. So before we do dive in, talk to me about your background, who you are. I'm sure many of our viewers will be familiar with you, but for those who aren't so familiar with you, who is Professor Muyiwa Oyinlola?
Okay, good morning, Juliana. Thank you so much for having me here. My name is Muyiwa Oyinlola. Currently, I am a Professor of Innovation for Sustainable Development at De Montfort University in Leicester. And that just means working in the area of sustainable development, trying to bring about development across the African continent. I guess I have loads of previous lives, but again, my current life is in the area of research and development.
Where are we as a continent, and more specifically Nigeria, where are we with sustainable development and, commitments made in Paris, our pledges to the United Nations? Because on the one hand, we show up at all the COPs, we tick all the boxes, we've got all of our strategy in place. But when you're having behind the scenes conversations with these guys, especially those in oil and gas, they're just not ready yet. So where are we? Paint the picture for us.
That's a good question, an interesting question. I think on the positive side, so what you might be aware of is that we have there's a senior special assistant to the president on sustainable development goals. So we have an office of the SDGs, and so we interacted with them at COP 28. And interestingly, Nigeria is topping the chart in quite a lot of areas.
In pledges or implementation?
Implementation. So, but I think what you have to remember is that there's a continuum, right? And so where we're starting from is not where other people are starting from. Again, the SDGs, the 17 SDGs, are quite a lot, but I think there's a lot of work to do. There's quite a lot of work to do, and it requires all players to be on board.
How do you think businesses in Nigeria can get over some of the hurdles, some of the headwinds that they may face? Because some people may see sustainable development as, quite frankly, unaffordable. It's like wanting to buy a Tesla, isn't it?
Yep.
Yes, we know that we should be driving electric cars. Some people can't afford it.
True. So I think this is where the role of government comes in. So there has to be policy incentives and interventions to be able to help businesses. And if you look at in the UK here, you've seen that the government has done a lot. So if you look a few years back, there were loads of incentives for solar panels, and then you have the critical mass adopting, and then you gradually roll back some of those things, and then it's now mainstream. Because what's happened also is that the economies of scale will push prices down. Okay, so I think it's one thing, the government has to be strategic in those sort of things to ensure that we have policies that are pushing people to do stuff in that area. I'll give you an example. So one of the projects I've done is on plastic, and you won't believe it, it is currently cheaper to have virgin plastic, to manufacture virgin plastic than
to recycle.
So there's no incentive for anybody to.
Wow.
The policy like saying every plastic has to have 10% of recycled content will just make that whole industry, will transform the whole industry. So I think that's one of the main things. It's always that government policy to drive the critical mass to uptake, and then it then becomes self-sustaining.
Absolutely. It's very fascinating. And you're right, once you kind of dig through the statistics, some of the most basic things are very, very alarming. We're running out of time. Professor, you've successfully delivered your first presentation. What next? Are you going to be doing another PhD, or are you going to be taking lots of this expertise and knowledge back home?
So yes, I do quite a lot of, I've been doing quite a lot back home across the continent, and I just returned a few days back, looking at that, engaging with policymakers in the power sector and bringing collaborators from different sectors like Chatham House, Warwick. And so what I intend to do is that bringing those stakeholders, facilitating those stakeholders together, industry, government, academia. And not just that, not just from abroad, but also trying to see how we work together with local institutions to strengthen our local institutions. So how do we ensure that research and development is key in our universities in Nigeria and across Africa?
Well, I think it's wonderful. We definitely will be following your journey because, of course, it's so important. We need to have a seat at the table, right? It's not just Greta Thunberg. There are also, people of colour that are making noise about sustainable development. And, of course, those expertise are very, very, very much needed in Nigeria. Professor Muyiwa Oyinlola, thank you so much for your time today.
Thank you very much, Elaine.